So I'll mute myself and over to you, Graham.
Right, so the presentation is called Accessibility of Common Gutenberg blocks. My name's Graham Armfield. I know some of you I've met before, and but maybe not all of you. So it's been a while since I've done a presentation for WordPress Pompey. So let's get going. For those of you who don't know me, I've been involved in accessibility for a long time now, around 20 years, not all with WordPress. I used to work for a large financial. That's where I learned my accessibility skills to start with. But for the last 12 years, I've run my own company and I've been a web accessibility consultant. What I mainly do these days is I test websites for accessibility, either formal reviews or more just ad hoc reviews. And I spend a lot of time training developers on how to build accessible websites, including using WordPress themes. So I'm helping out a client at the moment. I can't tell you who it is, but they're redoing their WordPress theme and I'm helping them do that with a series of workshops. I have built lots of accessible websites, mainly using WordPress for the last 12 years or so. Most of my clients have been small businesses. I've done some larger charities as well. And a lot of them have come to me because they know that I can build an accessible website. I've contributed to the Make WordPress Accessible team over the years. Not done so much on that recently, but there we go. Okay, so what this presentation is not about. When the Gutenberg editor was first introduced, there was a lot of work around, obviously, development. It was going to, a lot of changes in the format of it. And one of the things that seemed to get completely overlooked was the accessibility of the admin area. And I attended a WordCamp in Paris, the WordCamp Europe Paris, some years ago. And along with loads of other people in the accessibility team, we suggested lots of improvements to the Gutenberg editor accessibility, and pretty much all of them were just completely ignored, which was a little bit dispiriting. It's kind of the way that accessibility in WordPress has gone over the years. However, there was a bit of a focus on it a few years ago where someone paid for a huge accessibility review, which created lots and lots of GitHub issues. A lot of them have been addressed, and must say that as far as I can tell, the accessibility of the actual editor itself is a lot better than it used to be. But that's not what this talk is about. The reason why I've started to do some research on this before I even thought it was going to be a talk was because one of my own websites needs a bit of a lick of paint and that, and I thought it might be time to actually embrace the Gutenberg editor myself, because after the accessibility toing and froing, I kind of took against it for a while, and so I've never really used Gutenberg very much. And my clients' websites, they've all got the classic editor plugin installed, and on my own websites as well. So I thought it would be sensible to have a look at what output the blocks give you, because although you can change the output of the theme in the classic editor, whilst you can still do that to a certain extent if you're using blocks, the output from the blocks, you have less control over what gets put out to the site visitor's browser. So I thought I should have a look to see what we're getting into. So that's what this presentation is about. Now, those of you who've seen me present before will have seen a slide like this. Why is accessibility important? I'll keep it brief. The reason why companies get involved in accessibility work is two reasons. Firstly, they don't want to get sued. There is the Equality Act in the UK does actually specify websites that provide services and products, I believe, and so that's a good reason, one reason why companies get involved. But most people actually now are getting involved for the positive reason that if you have good accessible websites, it increases your customer and potential customers. Because if you add up all the people who are blind, who are deaf, have motor impairments, have cognitive impairments, etc., etc., etc. It comes to about 20% of the population. And if your website is not accessible, or the website that you're building for somebody else is not accessible, then people are going to go elsewhere. And so that is a positive reason why people get involved in accessibility now. And this accessibility can help everyone. Accessibility can have unintended good consequences. An example is shown by this photograph. Now, some of you may recognize this. It's the path that leads up from the north end of the Millennium Bridge in London across the Thames up to St. Paul's Cathedral, which you can see in the background here. And it's up a hill and it's up a long staircase. But if you stand here and look, as I did on this October day a few years ago, and you watch people, most people will actually go up the ramp, which is there for wheelchair users and obviously is used for people with buggies as well. So it's interesting that most people use the accessible ramp rather than the actual stairs itself. Moving on. For my analysis of what I'm going to do, just a couple of details. Windows 10 laptop. I'm using the latest Firefox. I've got the latest Chrome, but I'm going to be using Firefox for this demo. And WordPress 6.0.2. I've created a test website using the 2021 theme. And for my exploration, I used a screen reader, NVDA, which is a very popular screen reader on Windows machines. Screen readers typically used by people who are blind, but also are used by people with cognitive impairments. Some dyslexics, people with ADHD also use screen readers to help them digest your website. Okay, so the blocks that I've used in my analysis, there's some core blocks, some CoBlocks ones, Stackable, and some from Kadence. Now I'm going to zip through these because, as I mentioned earlier, I had, with all the ones that I initially used, I had so much material, I was still talking an hour and 10 minutes after I started. Don't want to do that today, so we'll get straight in. Now, I'm only going to be able to cover some blocks in each of those areas, and I'm only going to be able to cover common accessibility issues. So the ones I'm going to focus on is keyboard interaction. If I was a sighted keyboard user because I either chose to use the keyboard or I had to because I couldn't use a mouse because of a motor impairment, then I will be looking at how sighted keyboard users would interact with my pages. And then the other thing is I've done some testing with NVDA screen reader. Now, I'm not going to get NVDA going as part of this presentation. That would just take up too long. But I'm going to tell you the results, basically, and I might show you code snippets to explain why things are good or bad as we go through. So let's have a look. I'm going to come out of that presentation, and here, the shared window. Oh, gosh, right, okay. Okay, so I'm going to share my window again. That's intriguing. Okay. Oh, here we go, over here. That didn't work as expected. So here we go. I'm sharing a screen. Hopefully now you can still see it. And it's a very simple website. As I mentioned, it's using the 2021 theme, I believe, and a series of blocks. Now, I'm going to start off with some simple stuff. And this is some core Gutenberg blocks. Firstly, here I've got a heading level 1 that's put there by the theme. Then I've got a paragraph here, and then I've got a bullet point list or unordered list. I've got a heading level 2, a paragraph, a couple of links in it, heading level 3, heading level 4, an ordered list, a quote, and also then verses as well. You've got a block for that if you want to put lyrics on your screen, pull quote as well. And that's all this simple page has in it at the moment. And the good news is that these simple building blocks all produce very accessible content. There is really nothing to criticize here at all from my accessibility review persona. The only thing that I would say is if you have a link that opens a new window, it's always a good idea to tell people in advance that it's going to open a new window. Whilst I put that in the link text, there's nothing about the link that's different, and there's nothing there that tells a screen reader user that it opens a new window. That's the only criticism of this easy stuff. And now this is down to the theme really, but if I start tabbing around the page, you can see where keyboard focus is immediately. I'm using the Shift tab or tab to move around the page. And so that's all pretty good. Right, that's the very simple stuff out of the way. The next thing we're going to look at is tables, because there is a core block for doing tables. And so I've got two tables on this page. The first one is just a straight one that I created with the block, and it's actually in the when you're editing the block in the page, the table block, you can say that you want a header area, and it takes your first row of data cells and makes them headings, table headings. This is important because screen reader users, when they're in a table, especially if it's a bit more complicated than this table, it's really important that things, your column headers are marked up as headers so that the screen reader can tell people the context of where they are, because a screen reader user can only look at one cell at a time. So that's what you get by default by saying you want headers. However, you may want to do a table like this. This is a product comparison table. And I don't know quite why I chose these two models of cars that have not been around for a long, long time. But, here I've got column headers and I've got row headers. Now, it's not possible using the core table block to actually put row headers, say you want row headers in place. I actually had to update the HTML directly to see if you could do that. You can, but of course, most people who are, writing blog posts or content are not going to know how to do that. So it is a bit of a failing, that because there are a lot of, let's say, like a product comparison table, there are quite a few of those you might want, especially if you've got like an e-commerce site or something like that. So they're tables. The other thing as well, it's a small thing, but the caption, this caption is put there with a fig caption. There is actually a native element that is a child of the table element, which is caption, which is probably a better thing that could be used, but isn't used in this case. The bugs that I've found, or where I'm saying this is not so good, some of them I have already raised as issues with the various plugins that I'm going to be using, showing you. And the other ones, the ones that I haven't already raised, I will. So I will be raising issues on how to make a table better. Okay, the next thing we're going to look at is media. And really, we're talking about images here. I did have a YouTube in here, but really the code is pulled straight across from YouTube. So there's no, and it's not really affected by the fact that you've pulled it in via the editor. So the first thing is a plain image with a caption. Let's have a look at my notes here. This is fine. You can have a look at underneath this, and the image tag has an alt attribute. And this is where, when you upload an image into WordPress, it asks you for the alternate text. And if you put something in there, that's what gets put out in the alt attribute, which is what gets read out to a screen reader user. So that's all good there. You can also, if you want, have a cover image, maybe at the top of the page or something like that. This is one I've chosen, and it puts some text, whatever text you put in it, it puts it directly on top of the image, which is not that clever an idea. I've got an overlay which I've made a bit darker than the original image, which is quite a bright yellow and orange. This is one of my daughter's paintings. And so here I've made the overlay a bit darker. That's not really the fault of the actual block. That's just something you need to be aware of. But putting text directly on top of an image is not always a good idea. The next one is the media and text block. And it's just a picture with some text to the right-hand side of it. No problems there. That's all good. The The next thing is a gallery, and I've seemed to have got this kind of surround. I've tried getting rid of that, but I can't seem to get rid of it. But I've got 3 images in here, and the first 2 are actually, if I click on them, it shows me the full-size image. Now, something interesting in here, and I don't think this is new to Gutenberg, is when the big image is shown, the alt attribute is actually set to the URL for the image, which is not really that helpful. So I should be raising an issue about that. But the other thing around keyboard accessibility, if we go back up to the top, there's very little keyboard accessible stuff in this. Okay, yeah, so the focus is actually on this first image here, but you can't tell because there's no focus indication. And if I press the tab key, focus is now on this picture of Waterloo Bridge. And if I press the enter key, it does follow the link to not the same, actually a page with the image in it now, which is a bit interesting. So it does something different for keyboard users than what it does for mouse users. But there's no focus indication, so that could be better. Right then, so that's all the core blocks that I'm going to look at. The next thing we're going to do is to look at some CoBlocks one. Let's get rid of that for now. And I'll go to this page, but what I will need to do now is to activate the CoBlocks plugin. I tried a few plugins and I had them all switched on at once, and I was disappointed to discover that if you do that with the few that I had, which was CoBlocks, Gutenberg Forms, I'm not going to do that one today, Kadence, Stackable, and WForms Lite. There was one other one as well, which I've subsequently deleted. Basically, some of the blocks just did not work properly at all, which is disappointing, because if you want to use this block from this plugin and that block from that plugin, that's going to be a bit of a challenge as well. So there we go. Anyway, I've activated the CoBlocks plugin now. So if I refresh this page, then we'll get the real output. I've got a little aid memoir at the top of the page here. Okay, so here's my hero image at the top. So a big fat image that it's put full screen width here. I haven't done anything to made any efforts to try and style up this stuff. Literally, it's just a really simple theme. It's with 2021 with background color, and that's it really. So I've got a full width hero image. I've got these links on it. I'm not quite sure why this one disappears when I hover over it. I need to look at the settings. What we've got here, mentioned before about having text on top of the image. This is quite a dark image, since it was getting dark when I took this picture of this rather good pub in Chester. But if you had a light image at the back, you would struggle to read that text. Let's have a look at how the keyboard accessibility here. Let's okay. So keyboard focus is quite good on that button there. You see, get one now. It's showing keyboard focus. So those are all right. Do I need to say anything else? Okay, that's fine. Yeah, fine. Right, the next thing we've got here is they've got a block that is accordions. And the good news is these are pretty good as well. It uses the native summary and details HTML elements for this, which is the native way of doing accordions. Now, in the past, I mean, that's been around with HTML5 for quite some time, but it wasn't initially well supported by browsers, and it certainly wasn't initially well supported by screen readers as well. Now the situation's much better. So if you want an easy way to do an accordion, you can use summary and details now. So if I click on that, it shows you the panel, and if I click on that again, it shows you, it removes the panel. Now, there are a couple of styling options in here, but what you can't influence is the fact that the keyboard focus indication is extremely subtle. It's on the second one now. You see the more information, it's got this line around it. If I do Shift Tab, it moves focus onto my first accordion, but it's ever so hard to see. That's not great for keyboard users. I can still use them by pressing the enter key, and the enter key, it still works. But that's quite good. Generally, it's quite good, but the styling could be a bit better for the focus indication. The next thing, highlighted text. It's just some highlighted text with a span with a color around it, so that's no problem. The next thing, I've got a tweet button. So what's happening here, it doesn't really explain it very well for screen reader users. Sorry, and by the way, these accordions, because they use the summary and details, they're perfectly accessible to screen reader users. This one, it doesn't really explain what the button's for. It says tweet, but it will tweet about this particular page. It's like a sharing way of doing it. A slight challenge though is if I tab to that button, it changes the background color to white, and I've not worked out how to change that. So effectively your button, it becomes like almost invisible now. But there you go. The next thing we've got here is a carousel, and if I click on these things, you can see that the carousel is working, and you can see that there's a focus indication there. That white dotted line, that's actually a keyboard focus indication. I press the tab key, it's moved to the second one. Very, very subtle. It really needs to have better keyboard focus indication than that. The other thing to note, if I do shift tab now and then shift tab again, focus appears to have disappeared, but it's actually on this big image here. Now, if you listen to that in a screen reader, it will tell you that this is a clickable thing, which normally is the screen reader trying to tell you that as far as it can tell, there is some functionality attached to this thing, but it's not really very informative. And if I press the enter key repeatedly, there is no functionality attached to this thing. So I don't know why they've made it get focus. That seems to be a bit bizarre, really. But I can control this carousel with the keyboard by tabbing to the thing and pressing the enter key, and it swings the photograph into view. Okay, the next one is a bit challenging. I've got like a series of thumbnails here, and if I click on these, it actually shows me a Lightbox functionality, all these pictures that are in that group, and I can get rid of it like that. Now let's interestingly, doing this, you can't tell at the moment, but it has moved keyboard focus somewhere well away from where we were before. I don't know quite why that's happened, but in order to get the situation back, I'm going to put focus into there. If I do shift tab now, which should move me to the previous thing in the tab order of the page, I'd expect to move to one of these elements here, okay, because they are interactive. However, shift tab, it takes me back up to this image. It's on focus here. So if I do tab, basically none of these elements here can get focus. So if I'm a sighted keyboard user, I cannot see the Lightbox at all, because these things are not coded as interactive elements, even though they are. So there we go. It's also not great for a screen reader as well, because as a screen reader, I could move through these images. It doesn't really give me anything informative. And the other thing is, if I did do that with a screen reader, opens up the Lightbox, keyboard focus is still on the underlying page. So that's really a real problem. Then CoBlocks, I've also got a form in this page. Mostly it's okay, but this is like the default contact form, and I think I've added in a couple of other fields in as well. Having the name with first name and last name, there's a bug here, and the labels for the form elements are not wired up correctly. So as a screen reader user, when I arrive at these two text boxes here, I don't get any prompt as to what they're for. It works okay for the phone, email, and the date boxes, which is using input type equals date, which is HTML5 element, which is generally quite well supported now. But these two aren't marked up properly. The other thing about this form that's not marked up properly is when you've got these radio buttons here, if you've got a radio button group, it's answering a question. It's giving you the answer to a question, and you can choose one of them. The question here is, do you want sugar in your coffee, right? The answer is a yes or no. The problem here is because when they've marked this up, they haven't used a field set element with a legend, which is how, you know, it's the best way of marking up a group of radio buttons or checkboxes so that screen reader users will know what's going on here. So a screen reader, it will read out yes and no, but it won't give you the context for what that's all about. So there's a couple of problems here, and I should be reporting this problem with the radio buttons and also these two to CoBlocks at some point soon. The only other thing, I mean, there's a submit button here, that's all right. The only other thing I've done on here is these pricing tables. These are just like information with these two links here. As long as your link text is good, then it's all fine for everybody. So there we go. That's CoBlocks page. I haven't done all the CoBlocks blocks by any means. Let's go to Stackable, which means that I need to come in here, deactivate CoBlocks. And this is a bit of a pain. Every time I deactivate this, I get this blooming page coming up, which is a bit of a, it loses its fun halfway through. So Stackable, let's do this one. Activate that. Go back to here, refresh the page. Okay, so the first block I've used here is a hero block. So I've got a background image with a text area on the top of it. Obviously not literally a text area, but a container with some text in it. I can change the background colors and what have you. So everything's fine. I've got good hover indication on that link. Let's see what happens when I tab through. Oh, the button disappears. Because once again, I've got this thing whereby keyboard focus is change the background color to white with white text on the button, or the link, in fact, here. So that's not great, but I couldn't find quickly how I could change that. I'm sure there's a way of updating that somehow, but it's a bit of a pain. Okay, I've got two accordions here. Where are my notes? Okay, this is using summary and details as well. They're styled a little bit differently, and we've got a nice, good focus indication here. So that's nice. So that, you know, I can see immediately where focus is, and I can use the enter key to toggle the container. And because that's using summary and details, it's all accessible to a screen reader as well. The next one, though, is a little bit of a challenge, the show more or less block. Now here, this works a bit like an accordion in that it actually changes some text that's above here. Okay, so show less, some short text, show more, some long text. So that's okay for a keyboard user. Yeah, it's okay for a keyboard user. But for screen reader users, whilst the labeling of the buttons is kind of okay, it's a bit obvious, not obvious, that's the word I'm looking for, that if you're changing text that's above where I am on the page, screen reader users are not really going to know. There's no alert for a screen reader that it's updated the text above where you are on the page. An accordion, of course, it updates text below where you are on a page, and so that's a lot more easy to handle. So that could cause a bit of confusion for screen reader users who will come to this show more thing here, which is a link, and they'll action it, and then apparently nothing will happen. And then when they'll move down to see what's going on next, they'll be moving down the screen rather than up the screen, which is what they need to do. So that's not great. The next thing, where's focus now? Let's see. Okay. The next thing is this button group. Now you can see what these buttons are for. These are social media buttons. If I tab to them, you'll see that it's a very subtle focus indication that disappears almost immediately. Okay, we're now on the YouTube one. Okay, so that's not great. You really need focus indication to be more obvious and probably not to disappear very quickly. Okay, For screen reader users, this control is a disaster, because these images here are SVG images that are SVG representations of the icons, you know, like the trademark logos for these things, but they present no usable information for screen reader users at all. So on these things, they are links, but as far as the screen reader is concerned, they are all empty links. I found with NVDA screen reader that it would actually try and it would go into the URL that was the destination and read that out and to see if that would help, which of course, like Facebook, yeah, it might do, but it's not great. So there's only one more control on this page, and it's these two cards. These are okay. I've got these two links at the bottom here, and then I put a link in this text here. Let's see how keyboard interaction goes. Screen reader interaction is fine. If I tab to that link at the bottom there, it does the old white text on white background thing. I struggled to find a way of changing the colors on that, but I'm sure there is a way somewhere. But the default option is for the button disappears. So if you're a sighted keyboard user, this is a bit of a challenge. Moving on, and we've got this link here has focus, but that's very subtle focus indication compared to some of the things we've seen already. And once again, that button disappears there. Okay, that's our run through some stackable blocks. The last one we're going to do is Kadence, and there's a few interesting ones in here. Go back to the plugins. Deactivate Stackable, and then activate Kadence. Refresh the page. Okay, the first thing that's of interest in the Kadence one is that the first block on this page is a table of contents block, which is useful. If you've got a very long blog post, that's it's quite useful to actually provide a table of contents, and these are all in-page links to the headings on the page, like accordions here, tabs, and everything like that. So when the page loads, some JavaScript runs through the content area and creates this list of links, in-page links on the page, to actually take you down to those things. That's really useful and works quite well, except that this thing here that says table of contents, if that was a heading, that would be perfect, right? Because screen reader users rely on headings a lot. We all do, really. If we come to a page the first time and you run down a page, the obvious headings, things that are obviously headings, help to section up the page, and we can find things that we might be interested in. The same is true for screen reader users as well, and screen readers provide functionality to enable people to jump straight to headings on a page. So this is really useful functionality. So why not have table of contents as a heading rather than just some plain text? Okay, the next bit, now let me get my notes going again. Where are we? Oh yeah, Kadence. Okay, the accordions. This is not done using summary and details. This is done using another method, but it is a fully accessible one. So I can tab to these things, and I can press the enter key and it opens up the accordion like this. Press the enter key, and the good news is also that this is fully accessible to a screen reader user as well. The markup is perfect as far as I can tell. They've used the correct ARIA attributes in there to explain to screen reader users what's going on. The next thing, that's also true of the next one, which is a tab panel. Now, the styling is a little bit odd because I've put some extra information in the two tab headers, but not the third one. So the tab 3 is kind of sort of like floating away on its own. That could look a little tidier, but that's not really an accessibility issue. If I tab to the tab headers now, tab 1 has focus. It's momentarily focus indication. But now this uses the keyboard interaction that's approved by the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, and is good for accessibility as well. So now I'm in the tab headers. I can use the left and right arrow keys. I'll press the right arrow key now and it moves to the next tab header and then shows you the tab panel corresponding to that tab header, and once again tab header number 3. Okay, so that's how you're supposed to have tab panels working for keyboard users, and so that's good. The markup included in the ARIA is perfect as well. It's pretty good. Okay, so the next thing on the page is a testimonial. There aren't any interactive elements in there. There is an image, but I'm pretty certain that that's got an alt attribute on it. Oh, it's a background image. So background images are completely invisible to screen readers. So there's no representation of an image there. But that's not a problem, since it just doesn't, doesn't really show you anything in this case. So that's not a problem. What else we got on here? Gallery and Lightbox. Okay, so here I've got, once again, pictures of this pub in Chester, and in a nice little Lightbox going on here. That's good. So where's keyboard focus at the moment? Is it up here? I'm not sure where it is at the moment. Okay, right, so if I press the tab key now, okay, yeah, focus is now actually on this image here, but you can't tell because there's no focus indication. If I press the tab key again, focus is now on the second image, but you can't tell because there's no focus indication. If I press the enter key, it does open up the Lightbox, and where's focus now? It's actually still on the underlying page, which is a pain in the backside. But then once again, the left and right arrow keys do work. So you could argue that this Lightbox was keyboard accessible, but it doesn't. There's nothing to tell me what the keystrokes are anywhere, which would be really helpful. If I press the escape key, it closes the Lightbox. So moving on, where's focus now? Oh yeah, okay. This info box, it's a glorified link effectively. And if I press the tab key, you'll notice very briefly there is a focus indication, but it disappears very quickly. There, you might notice a thin black line appears around it and it's gone away. This momentary focus indication is a real pain in the backside for keyboard users, but there you go. Okay, right, so the next thing on here is a form, and focus indication is quite good on these things. And as far as accessibility goes, actually this is a pretty good form. It's one of the best forms I've found in a plugin, whether it's a block plugin like this one, or a contact form plugin like Contact Form 7 or something like that. The accessibility is mostly quite good. Okay, the labels are linked with the input fields, which means that screen reader users are going to know what these input fields are for. The slight criticism is that this indicator for required field, it is in the label, so it gets read out as star, which is how screen readers read out asterisk, and it could do with having some ARIA in there. But if I submit this form, it's actually got error messages that come out, nice clear error messages, and I've actually set these error messages up when I created this page, when I created this form, and they are properly linked to the input field. So a screen reader user will know what these error messages are. So it's let down slightly. This is an input type equals email, which is appropriate in some ways because it's an email form. But if I put some incorrect format in here and submit the form, it actually gives me the browser validation method message, right? Rather than it asks you to set up a valid, a valid email message, but it doesn't show it for some reason. So that's a bit of a fault, really. Let me refresh the page. Okay. I actually took the first form and then I added a couple of other elements myself. There's a drop down there that's perfectly accessible. The one thing that lets it down though big time is these radio button groups. As I mentioned before with the other radio buttons, the yes no radio buttons, it doesn't put the radio buttons inside a field set and a legend with a legend what the question is, right? So screen reader users are going to find it a lot harder to understand quite what these radio buttons are for. If the wording is appropriate, like eat in, take away, delivery, that's kind of obvious, isn't it? That those are maybe my options for eating the pizza. But if it's yes and no, then it's not giving me any context at all. So there we go. Right, have I said everything? So yeah, this form here is pretty good from an accessibility perspective. It's got some quite specialist bits of markup in there without me having to do any extra stuff as well. But there's still a couple of things that are wrong, and I will be raising some issues with the plugin author on that. I think they've been quite responsive so far and stuff I've raised with them already. And there we go. That is the end of my little block tour around a variety of blocks talking about accessibility. So let's go back into here. As I mentioned before, I'm going to report all the issues I find, or if I haven't already done so. And one of the plugin authors has fixed a couple of them already. So there we go. I hope that was of some use to you. There's a lot of information in there. What I might do when I put this presentation file together, I might upload it to SlideShare. I'll put in some more detail about what I found about each of the plugins. It's in there, but I just didn't have time to go through that. So anyway, I hope that was useful, and please feel free to ask me any questions that you might have. Okay, I've noticed that there's a couple of questions in the chat already. This is good. Oh, right, okay. Okay, well, a demo of Screen Reader would be nice to see. Now, thank you for that, Terry. I wasn't going to use the Screen Reader, but if there's time, I will actually give a quick demo of a Screen Reader. Let me see if there's any other questions first. Herb, you've got a couple of questions. You've got one about uppercasing text. And then also row headers. Can it be done with CSS? Is that poor for accessibility? Do you want to clarify what you mean by those questions, Herb?
Well, I'll do the row headers one first. So yeah. when you were looking at that table block, and yeah, you did row headers, I assume you went into the HTML and you put in a special table tag in there.
Yes, I changed the first cell in each of the rows to a TH rather than a TD. And
the person using the screen reader will have a better understanding of it. It's like that, will they?
Yes.
As opposed to
if you don't have a TD as the first cell in each of the rows, then a screen reader user who is totally blind won't have any concept that that is a row header.
Right.
Even if you use CSS styling.
Okay.
CSS styling could help sighted users understand that it's a header, but it certainly doesn't help screen reader users.
All right. Good. The other one was something that I've noticed recently with the latest version of Gutenberg, and that when you're in the block editor itself, there's been a decision that the labels for certain sections, which are panel rows, will be uppercased.
Right.
So where you used to have size, which was appear with a capital letter S and then IZE, it now all appears in uppercase size. And next to that, default will have uppercase default. This has been applied to quite a few places, so it's now consistent. But this uppercasing I was looking at it and thinking that's not right. And then suddenly I went and used a block which Jetpack provides, and they have a bit where there's a label for the consent form. So you can have, by submitting this form, I'll let you use my email address.
Yeah.
And that was all appearing in uppercase. And I thought, well, is that not a problem that there's too much uppercase text that people want to read or don't want to read? Is that an accessibility problem? And also, why has your uppercasing of your control affected the plugins block? So there were two parts to it.
Yeah.
So that for you, it's there is too much uppercasing by CSS a problem for a number of different people?
Yeah, I'd say so, because it's a bit, we've all seen on Facebook or Twitter where some people get off on a rant and put like huge sentences of block capitals and everything like that. And it's actually been shown that it's a lot harder to read a sentence written in block caps than it is to read a sentence that's not written in block caps, because the site, the people recognize words not just for the letters that are in the word, but the shapes of the words as well. And so it is kind of an accessibility issue. There are no accessibility guidelines about it in terms of the WCAG guidelines, which are used for sort of reviewing sites. But I'd say that that's more of a usability thing, because it affects everybody. In fact, it might affect screen reader users a lot less. Now, sometimes though, if you have a word in block capitals, instead of pronouncing it as the word, what some screen readers will do, and I think there's probably settings on this in the screen reader, it will actually read out the letters one after the other. So for example, if you have like I was going to say BBC, that's going to be in caps. So you want the screen reader to say BBC. But if you had the words best friends in full capitals, some screen readers will actually pronounce it BESTFRIENDS, which of course takes the meaning away. So I'd say it is kind of a usability issue. And there is a huge overlap between usability and accessibility, but it more affects anyone who's sighted, really. I think anyone who is a sighted user is going to find sentences of block caps a lot harder to read. If it's one or two words, I think probably the significance is a lot less. So I don't think it's a significant accessibility issue at all, but I think it's just bad practice, really.
Yeah, for us, for British people, the words will be fairly short, but if you translate it into other languages,
well, yes,
does that cause problems for German?
Well, I should imagine so. Like I know German has some quite long words because they use compound words, don't they? I don't speak much German. I did do it at O level, but that's as far as I got. But they string words together, and I think also maybe what the Welsh do that too. That could be difficult to read, definitely, yeah. But I don't think it's not really classed as in the WCAG sense of the word. It's not an accessibility issue. I think it's more usability.
Right, thank you very much. There's a couple more in there.
Does that satisfy you, Herb, in your questions?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, Elaine, if I hope that I've pronounced that correctly, or Eileen, sorry. Thank you, that was really interesting. Thank you for your comments. What do you think of accessibility on Divi? Now, actually, that's a good question. I'm afraid I can't answer it because I've never used it. Now, I know someone called Claire Brotherton. She lives in Edinburgh, and she is a WordPress developer that probably you, Herb, have come across at a few WordCamps in your time. And she goes under the title of A Bright Clear Web. She's on Twitter. She's also got her own website. She's done a lot of work with looking at the accessibility of Divi and potentially other page builders as well. So I'm going to put in the chat A Bright. This is the name of her company and her name, Claire Brotherton. So check her out because she's probably written blog posts about that. The next one, question 2, screen readers and other best tests can we use to check things? Okay, now I use NVDA whenever I'm doing testing, and let's get rid of this and I'll get my screen reader going in just a moment. I use NVDA most of the time, and I certainly use it for when I'm testing for accessibility. It's one of the most popular screen readers in the world. It's only available on Windows machines, though. I will say, if you've got a Mac, then you'll be looking at using VoiceOver on the Mac. If you're using an iPhone or an iPad, then there's also a version of VoiceOver that's available on that as well. It's NVDA. It's a very complicated piece of kit, and I'll get it running in just a moment. If Herb, we've got a few minutes, I can demo NVDA briefly. Question? He's gone away.
No, I haven't. I just muted myself. Yes, you got time, Graham. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'll go through that in a moment then. But suffice to say, there's a lot of keystrokes, and I'm not a power user of screen reader, but I do use it when I'm doing accessibility reviews. It's quite daunting to start with because there's an awful lot of commands. I'm going to be switching NVDA on in a minute, and I'll be using the keystroke commands to control it. There's a lot to remember. You can get cheat sheets. But anyway, let's have a go. I think I'm just going to double check that I'm actually sharing my sound, because I do a lot of the training courses via Zoom and I often forget to turn it on. Yes, I am. So let's get I'm running on Firefox here, and NVDA runs best with Firefox. It's open source tool.
Welcome to NVDA dialog. Welcome. Simple stuff. WordPress testing. Mozilla Firefox.
Right. Can someone confirm that you can hear the screen reader? Good. Thank you, Steve.
From Aline to everyone.
And
yes, alert.
And also,
from Calvin Smith to everyone.
The thing is with Zoom as well is that the chat facility has got good accessibility as well. So whenever anyone puts anything in the chat facility, NVDA will read it out, which is nice. Assuming you're expecting that. So it's very verbose, and the control key becomes your friend, because if I press the control key, it just stops saying what it was saying before. NVDA also has a useful feature, which I'll engage now, which is the speech viewer. Because it's very verbose, you can't always hear immediately what's going on. I'll put the speech viewer on.
NVDA Pref Tools View Speech Viewer S. Simple stuff. WordPress testing. Mozilla Fire. NVDA Speech. Simple stuff. WordPress testing. Mozilla Fire.
And what the speech viewer does is it shows you visually what it is that NVDA is saying. Okay, now I'm at the top of the page, and so it's telling me simple stuff, WordPress testing. That's reading out what the page title is, okay, which is what you see in the browser tab bar at the top there. It tells me that I'm running Mozilla Firefox, and then it's gone into the actual document, and the page title is simple stuff, WordPress testing. So effectively it reads out the same again. And then the first thing it's come to is a visited link, skip to content. Now, you might have heard of skip links before. If you're tabbing around a page, the skip link, it should be the first thing you come to, and it's a jump from the top of the page down to the top of the main content. Most WordPress themes do it these days, not all, but most, and certainly the default themes do, and it's quite a useful bit of functionality. Now, I'm actually in this web page now. The screen reader is looking at a copy of the DOM. Some screen readers actually make their own DOM. Others look at effectively the one that the browser's got. There's different ways of doing it. So now I'm in this web page. So you think, okay, I'm a blind screen reader user. How on earth do I find what's on this page and what's useful? Well, the first thing to know is how to move around. And if I press the down arrow key.
Banner landmark visited link WordPress testing.
Okay. Now I'm going to move my mouse, and you can see that we're on this thing at the top, which is the site name, basically, WordPress testing. Now, NVDA has told me banner landmark. Landmarks are predefined regions on the page, and we're in the banner at the moment. And it's a visited link WordPress testing. It takes me back to the homepage of this site, which I'm not going to follow because there is nothing on that page. If I want to, if I'm in a screen reader user and I've come across the link, I can press the enter key and it will follow that link. Okay, I'm not going to do that now, but I'm going to press the down arrow key again.
Let's see if it works.
And that's the text that's beneath the WordPress testing there. Press the down arrow key again.
Primary menu navigation landmark list with 6 items visited link current page simple stuff.
Right, there's a lot of information there. Primary menu navigation landmark. So it's telling me I'm in a navigation list and it's telling me it's the primary menu navigation. Okay. And then I've got a list of 6 items, which is the links that are in the navigation up there. And the first one is visited link current page simple stuff. So it's telling me it's a visited link. It knows it's the current page because the WordPress theme has put the necessary ARIA attributes in there to tell screen readers that this is the page we're on at the moment. Okay. Press the down arrow key again.
Visited link tables.
And again.
Visited link media.
Yeah. So yeah, if I press the down arrow key enough, I will actually get to the bottom of this page. That's going to take some time. The other way of doing it, I can press the insert and down arrow key, and it will, what that tells the screen reader is to read everything on the page from here on in. Now that's something you would do when you find a section of the page that you're interested in, but it's not something you probably would do when you first arrive at a page. When you first arrive at a page, screen reader users will use one of 2 methods probably to find their way around. The first thing that that many, if not all screen reader users will do is to have a look at the headings on the page. And so you better make sure that your heading structure is good. And how they will do that is they will press the H key, and I'll do that now.
Main landmark simple stuff heading level 1.
Okay. And so it says main landmark simple stuff heading level 1. Okay. So we're on this heading now. And it's moved screen reader focus to that heading. Now, screen reader focus and keyboard focus are not always, in fact, sometimes they're rarely in the same place, but screen reader focus is in different. If I press the H key again.
Heading level 2, heading level 2.
It's got heading level 2, heading level 2. So it's because the markup's good with these heading blocks, then it's telling the screen reader exactly what's going on. And if I do Shift H,
simple stuff heading level 1.
It moves to the previous header again. So this is a way I can either just press the H key all the time and it will take me heading, 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 heading. Once I find a section of the page
heading level 2, heading level 2
I'm interested in, then I can press the insert down arrow key, stroke.
Heading level 2, heading level 2. Here is a paragraph. There's link to the visited link homepage in it. And a visited link that
okay, so it's going to read the rest of the page content from where I am now. Now, the other way that I said that screen reader users have 2 ways of finding their way around a page. The first, headings, really important that you use headings right, and if you're building pages yourself in the website, try and get the heading levels correct, because screen reader users will use this information that you can see here, heading level 2, heading level 3, as a hierarchy of sections, subsections, subsections, etc. The other way of doing it is to use landmarks. Now you'll see at the top of the page it mentioned we were in a banner, then it talked about a navigation landmark, and there are ways of finding landmarks on the page. I'm also going to show you another functionality that NVDA have got, and other screen readers have something similar, the elements list. So I'll do insert F7.
Elements list dialog. Tree view.
Right, and I'll press the control key again so that it doesn't talk loads. But basically, it's a tree view. By default, it comes up with a list of all the links on the page, right? And so you can see all the links. So this is why it's really important that your link text is meaningful, because a lot of screen readers do this. they'll get a list of the links on the page, and all of them are completely out of context. So it's important that your links tell you where you're going to go, basically.
I think
so these are the navigation
we
links.
can't see, Graham.
I beg your pardon?
I think you can see something that's popping up that we can't actually see.
Oh. Ah, okay.
when you've been pressing the control button,
Can you not see this elements list on top of everything?
Nope. Can you?
Okay. Hold on a second.
Simple Stuff WordPress Testing Mozilla Firefox.
Right, I'm gonna
Simple Stuff
stop
WordPress
sharing
Testing
and
document.
then start sharing again.